Julian thought he'd found forever with Mariah, whose laugh at a party sparked a love that led to marriage. But cracks formed as Mariah grew distant, her past with ex-boyfriend Tobias resurfacing. When Tobias's accident sent her running to him, confessing lingering love, Julian's world shattered. He left, choosing self-respect over a fading marriage. Her desperate messages couldn't undo the betrayal. With support from friend Malik and sister Riley, Julian moves to a new town, adopting Moxie and rediscovering peace. Will he heal fully, or will Mariah's letter pull him back into the past? Love stories that spark curiosity and touch the heart? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more captivating tales from Reddit and beyond. Share your thoughts, drop a like, and join our community. Your support fuels thought-provoking content that connects us all. Stay curious and keep watching for more. Shatter so utterly. She crumpled to her knees on the hardwood floor, hands trembling as she clutched her phone, voice thick with tears. "Please," Mariah begged, her words cracking like ice underfoot. "I have to be there. He's hurt. I still love him." Her confession didn't slice through me. It exploded, silent and all-consuming, like a building imploding inward. I said nothing. No accusations, no demands for clarity. Just a stillness born of disbelief. My knuckles whitened against the steering wheel as I drove her through the night, each turn of the tires louder than her sobs. The city's lights blurred past, indifferent to the unraveling beside me. At the hospital, she didn't even glance back. She flung open the car door with desperation, bolted across the lot, and vanished through the automatic glass doors, chasing Tobias like he still held the gravity of her world. I sat in that driver's seat long after she disappeared inside, silence howling where love used to be. That night, I returned home hollow and moved with a mechanical precision, as if grief had rewired me. I packed only what I needed, some clothes, my laptop, a few books, leaving behind her favorite mug, our shared photos, the tiny ceramic fox she'd bought in Asheville. On the kitchen counter, I left a note. 4 sentences, no flourish, no fury, just, "Don't worry. He can have you now." She came home to a ghost of our life, an apartment stripped of presence but echoing with the absence. Since then, 167 messages. I haven't read most of them. The previews blur together. "Please, Julian. It wasn't what you think." I didn't know what to do. I delete each one like I'm swiping away a phantom I still feel in the room. The thing is, I wasn't supposed to go to that party. Janelle had texted me midweek, her message clipped and irreverent, exactly her style. "You need to stop rotting alone and talk to humans." It had jolted me. Not the words, her knowing. She always had that uncanny way of hearing the quiet in me. So I threw on my old denim jacket, cuffed the sleeves, and drove across town, the radio low and mood lower. Her apartment was already alive when I walked in, dim lighting casting golden shadows across the walls, scented candles melting into pools, wine glasses abandoned like relics of a revelry. Half in progress. The playlist was moody, some mix of folk and soul, just loud enough to cover the awkward silences. People clustered in orbits of familiarity, clinking drinks and laughing too loudly at jokes weathered by years of retelling. I gravitated to the snack table, classic introvert maneuver. That's when I saw her. She was standing off to the side, arms wrapped across her stomach like armor, wearing a mustard yellow top that hung off one shoulder, as if the fabric itself had been caught off guard by her beauty. There was an unintentional grace about her, and yet a heaviness too, as if she were measuring every second she remained. No phone, no fake scrolling, just presence. Alone, but not lonely. Still, not waiting. I don't know what made me approach. Maybe the symmetry of 2 misplaced souls. Maybe the way her gaze moved. Curious, guarded. Or maybe I was already halfway into the story we hadn't begun. I reached for the salsa, glanced at her, and said, "I think this dip may have violated at least 3 health codes." Her head turned, quick as a whip, and for a flicker of a moment, I thought I'd made a mistake. But then, she laughed. Not a polite chuckle, not a forced smile. It was the kind of laugh that cracks open something hidden, deep, warm, slightly raspy. It lodged itself into my rib cage. "That bad, huh?" she said, arching a brow as she reached for a chip. Well, if I wake up with food poisoning at 3 a.m., I'm holding you personally responsible. And we stood by that snack table like it was the safest place in the universe. She said her name was Mariah. I told her I was Julian. After that, it felt like breathing. No icebreakers, no strained stories, just flow. She told me about her childhood in Chapel Hill, sneaking books under the covers and reading with a flashlight until her eyes ached. I told her how I used to take apart old radios just to see if I could understand the chaos inside my aunt, and how often I couldn't put them back together. She laughed again, softer this time. When exes came up, I tiptoed, but she didn't flinch. She spoke about Tobias like one might mention a worn-out photograph, familiar, faded, harmless. It ended clean, she'd said. No mess, just two people who weren't meant to last. I remembered filing his name away, not from suspicion, but caution, like noting a crack in a window that wasn't dangerous yet, a harmless fracture. By midnight, the crowd had thinned into scattered clusters and distant murmurs. Janelle passed by, wine in hand, leaned in and whispered to Mariah, "He's the least boring man in this room. Good pick." Mariah flushed a delicate pink, but didn't step away. Later, when she shivered, I offered her my jacket. She resisted at first, but I draped it over her shoulders anyway. A silent gesture, soft and solid. When she slipped her arms into the sleeves, something changed. She smiled, a smile so subtle I almost missed it, but so real it still lives in the corners of my memory, like the last light before nightfall. I walked her to her car, expecting silence, a polite goodbye, but she leaned against the door, tilted her head, and said, "You're not like most guys. Is that a compliment or a warning?" She smiled. "I'll let you know." That night, back in my apartment, I couldn't sleep. Her laugh, her first laugh, replayed like a song stuck on repeat. I wasn't someone who dwelled in feelings. Logic was my compass. But with her, everything had come so naturally, like we were already mid-conversation from another life. Within 2 months, we were inseparable. Food truck dates, midnight movies, long walks filled with laughter and argument. She swore by soul music. I defended jazz. She introduced me to her sister Riley, a straight-talking storm of insight. I brought her to meet Malik, my anchor, my oldest friend. They both liked her. Everyone did. My parents adored her. My mother called her sharp. My father said she sparked something in my eyes. By 6 months, we had moved into a crooked little apartment in Brookside. One bedroom, finicky heating, and a couch that slouched more than it sat. But it was ours. On moving day, she stood in the empty living room and shouted, "We made a nest!" And I laughed because she was right. We had. The proposal came a year and a half later. No grand gestures, just two barefoot fools in the kitchen, flour in our hair, homemade pizza in progress. I knelt, dish towel still over my shoulder, heart full. She said yes with a kiss that tasted of tomato sauce and joy. I truly believed I had found it. The love that threads through novels and songs. The kind that begins with shared laughter and grows into a lifetime. But now I know. Sometimes laughter is the first note of a love song, and sometimes it's the echo before the silence. If I had known where we would end, I might have listened harder to that first laugh. Not just the melody, but the shape of it, the breath in between, because now all I have are echoes and a name I never wanted to resent. The hush of dawn spilled into our apartment like a whisper, thin light stretching across the wooden floor, touching the edge of the couch where Mariah used to hum while brushing her teeth. I wasn't thinking about silence back then, or change, or absence. No, back then I was simply a man in love, with a woman whose laugh cracked open the world, honest and unguarded, and whose smile felt like the first page of a vow. Our first year as husband and wife unfolded like a lullaby sung in soft light. Slow Sundays in bed, her head against my chest. The weight of her hand, a quiet benediction. Mornings bled into rituals, arguing gently over the merits of hand washing versus the dishwasher, sharing earbuds over breakfast. Her rolling her eyes when I insisted Coldplay wasn't just sad guy music. Even our spats had a softness to them. Mini storms that ended in forehead kisses and apologies murmured beneath tangled blankets. The apartment smelled of cinnamon candles and detergent. Our soundtrack, the clack of my keyboard while she curled up on the couch reading, her humming drifting through the rooms like it belonged to the walls themselves. We didn't have Ma, but every inch of that space echoed with us. Home wasn't a place, it was Mariah. And that made it holy. Our families breathed easier knowing we'd found each other. Riley, her sharp-tongued sister with the kindest eyes, became a fixture at our table. Malik, my best friend since middle school, taught her to dribble when my ankle was out of commission. Weekends melted into laughter and spilt drinks during game nights. Inside jokes scrawled on sticky notes, left in my laptop bag. You got this, nerd. One still lives in my wallet, creased and sacred. There was something rare in the simplicity of our joy. But joy, even sacred, is not immune to shadows. The first flicker came quietly, the way seasons change while you're not paying attention. We were in a bookstore some rainy afternoon when a man called out her name. Mariah turned, and the smile she offered him was too polished, too bright. Tobias. He said it like a memory, and she stiffened like a secret exposed to air. She laughed when he asked how she'd been, but it was too high, a laugh stretched thin over discomfort. As we walked away, I teased, "You sounded like a senator dodging scandal." She chuckled, but it never reached her eyes. "I haven't thought about him in years," she said. Too fast, too rehearsed. I didn't press. I didn't want to be that man, the one who minds his wife's past for ghosts and shame. Everyone has a history. I respected hers. I trusted her. But then Christmas arrived, snow dusting the windows, lights warming every corner. Janelle, loud, lovely Janelle, came over for dinner, her laughter a familiar echo from college days. We drank wine, slipped into nostalgia. Mariah giggled, eyes glassy with tipsy comfort, and then Janelle said it. "Remember when Tobias came to that Halloween party as a zombie professor? You almost threw your drink on him." Mariah laughed too loud, clutching her glass like it was anchoring her to the room. "Oh God, Tobias." "What a disaster," she said, teeth grazing her lip. "I think he still has that hideous beard." It wasn't the words, it was the way she said his name, like she was trying to scrub it clean, like she wanted it to mean nothing so badly that the effort itself betrayed her. That night, I found her on the couch, the soft glow of her phone reflecting off her cheek. I leaned over the back casually. "Looking at old party pics?" She flinched, locked her screen. "Just curious if Tobias still looks like a raccoon?" I laughed, hollow. She shrugged. "Yep, still unfortunate." I washed dishes after that, listening to the silence stretch between us. But I could still hear that click of her screen locking, sharp and final, like a slammed door. From then on, I noticed it. The drift, a new stillness in her touch. Her kisses came slower, shorter. When we curled up on the couch, she leaned just far enough away that I could feel the absence. Not cold, but not quite warm. I tried to bring her back with small things. Her favorite chocolate tucked into her purse. A weekend trip to Asheville, she once mentioned in passing. I took on more chores, hoping to give her breath. She always said thank you. She always smiled. But there was something in that smile. Empty, gracious, like accepting a gift she didn't want but didn't know how to refuse. I told myself it was stress. Work had been brutal, commutes long, deadlines merciless. That had to be it. Until one night I came home late, the scent of takeout still on my coat. She was in bed, eyes closed, phone lit beneath the blanket. Her body still, too still. I didn't say a word. I changed clothes, climbed into bed, and faced the ceiling. She breathed slowly, deliberately. Not asleep, just pretending. When she finally drifted off for real, I turned and watched her in the soft wash of moonlight. Her face looked peaceful. Mine felt like glass about to crack. There's a kind of loneliness that grows in silence, that breeds in unspoken things, the kind that finds you even when you're inches away from the person you love. I didn't want to accuse her. I didn't want to be jealous. She hadn't done anything wrong, not really. But I couldn't unsee the dimming, couldn't unfeel the growing space between her world and mine. The woman who once pulled me into her lap with popcorn now sat at the far edge of the couch, eyes lit by her phone, not me. It was like living with a photograph, still lovely, still familiar, but fading. One day I came home early. She was asleep on the couch. Her phone sat unlocked beside her, nothing open, no messages, no apps, too clean. And that terrified me more than if I'd seen something damning. Because no one's phone is that pristine, not unless they've made it that way. I set it down carefully, pulled a blanket over her, then sat at the window as the sun dipped below the skyline. When she woke, she smiled. Easy, effortless. I smiled back, matching her tone, hiding the fracture deep beneath my ribs. Because that's what love does. It hopes, even as it trembles. It clings, even as it splinters. Back then, I didn't know. I didn't understand that what I thought were surface cracks were just the first signs of an unraveling. That the warmth I missed wasn't lost. It had already begun to leave. The wrench slipped from my hand, clattering onto the concrete with a sharp metallic cry that shattered the stillness of the garage. Dust motes hung in the golden slats of sunlight, cutting through the open door. And I stood there, breathless, fingers trembling. Not from the weight of the tool, but from the weight of a truth I could no longer ignore. Mariah's scent still lingered faintly on the hoodie she'd left draped over the passenger seat of her car. Lavender and something unfamiliar. Maybe a new perfume, maybe someone else's cologne. I wasn't sure which unnerved me more. I leaned back against the workbench, letting the silence settle around me, thick as fog. There was no longer any need to pretend the quiet was accidental. It was intentional, a boundary we had both erected, word by unspoken word. She wasn't the woman who used to kiss me mid-sentence just because. The one who once traced promises across my back with her fingers as we fell asleep. That woman had grown quieter, more elusive, as if she were slipping behind a veil woven of late nights, vague answers, and distant eyes. For weeks I had been orbiting a version of her I couldn't reach. Still sleeping in the same bed, yes, but the bed might as well have been a continent. Our once sacred rituals now felt like relics. Saturday pancakes were forgotten. Her goodnight kisses turned into the mere brushing of air, and her smile, the one that once belonged to me, now looked rehearsed, offered with the cold courtesy you'd give a cashier, not a partner. I'd tried. God, I had tried. That Friday evening, I crafted a memory from scratch. Lasagna with too much ricotta, garlic bread crisped at the edges just how she liked, and our old Coltrane record playing like a whisper from a better time. I lit candles, poured wine. I waited. For hours. When she finally stepped through the door at 11:30 p.m., eyes rimmed in fatigue and indifference, I felt something fracture, not explosively, but with the quiet finality of something that had been weakening for far too long. "You cooked," she said, more surprised than pleased. "I thought we could eat together," I said, rising slowly from my seat. "It's been a while." Her glance barely lingered on the table before she dropped her gaze. "I already ate." The words cut, sharp and simple. It wasn't the missed meal, it was the missing thought. She hadn't called, hadn't asked if I had eaten. No apology, no warmth, just silence. And then the soft shuffle of her heels as she disappeared down the hallway. I cleared the table alone, but poured the untouched wine down the drain, sat on the edge of our bed, watching her sleep with her back turned and her phone cradled like a secret she refused to share. I began to watch her, not with suspicion, but with heartbreak. Her answers, when I asked about her day, grew clipped. Fine, busy, nothing special. Her laughter never made it home anymore. I kept trying, brought her small things she used to love, kissed her forehead before work. But her eyes were no longer present. They were always elsewhere, searching a horizon I wasn't invited to. Then came the night I looked at her phone. It was a moment I hadn't prepared for, hadn't thought myself capable of. She was in the shower. The device sat lit on the nightstand. Curiosity didn't drive me. Grief did. The grief of being erased from someone's life while still sitting right beside them. It was pristine. No messages, no history, no evidence of a life being lived. It didn't look used. It looked curated, controlled, sanitized. Phones are messy. Hers was an exhibit. I placed it back with trembling hands, the hum of the water behind the bathroom door amplifying the hum in my chest. Still, I said nothing. What was there to say? Why does your life look like a showroom? Why do I feel like I'm grieving you when you're still right here? Then came the call, a Tuesday. She had left early, saying something vague about a meeting. I'd taken the day off, burnout biting at my nerves. At 2:45 p.m., her phone rang where she'd forgotten it on the coffee table. The name on the screen, Janelle, but I answered, voice tight. Hey, it's Julian. Mariah left her phone. A pause, then, weird. I was calling to see if she was still planning to meet me. My heart skipped. Meet you? Yeah, for drinks. 1 o'clock. She didn't show, didn't text. I figured maybe something came up. I swallowed hard. She told me she was working. Another pause, this one longer. Oh, maybe she had to cancel last minute. Yeah, probably. When the lie echoed between us. That night she returned home like nothing had happened. She was still using that same gentle, distant tone, like I was someone she once knew well but had slowly started forgetting. Long day, she said. I nodded. Where were you? Work? Her eyes didn't flinch, but her throat did. A tick of guilt flickered. I pounced. Janelle called, said you didn't show. She froze, just for a breath, but it was enough. I forgot, she said too quickly. I had to cover a shift. I didn't argue, just walked past her, hollow. She followed. Julian, don't make this into something it's not. I turned. My voice came low and even. You already did. She had no answer, just silence and the soft click of the bedroom door closing behind her. That night I lay beside her, feeling the chasm between us stretch windway and cold. I didn't reach for her. Couldn't. I was afraid of what I'd find, or not find. I wasn't losing her anymore. I had already lost her. And the realization lived in the way she sighed in her sleep, free of conflict. It lived in the untouched corner of the lasagna still wrapped in foil in the fridge. It lived in the silence that used to mean comfort, now twisted into a language of omission and retreat. Whatever we'd built, it hadn't collapsed. It had eroded, silently, invisibly over time. And now I could see the cracks everywhere I looked. Even in the mirror, the wrench slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor of the garage, echoing louder than it should have in the stillness of the morning. The tools, some never touched since we'd unpacked them, lay in a scattered, half-forgotten sprawl. Monuments to all the things I'd meant to fix. I had taken the day off again, not from fatigue, but from pretense. I was tired of playing house in a place where love had thinned, where my wife drifted through rooms like a ghost tethered to memories I couldn't reach. Then came the door. It flung open with a violent urgency, the sharp bang of wood against wall, slicing through the silence like a gunshot. I stepped out of the garage, hands blackened with grease, wiping them on a worn rag. Mariah stood in the entryway, trembling. Her keys dangled from one hand like she'd forgotten she still held them. Her skin had gone pale, ashen almost, and her eyes darted, unfocused, full of dread. Julian, she gasped, her voice clipped by panic. I need you to take me to the hospital. I blinked, blood draining from my own face, bracing for words that hadn't yet arrived. Tobias, she choked out, like the name itself wounded her. There was a car accident. It's bad. I didn't answer. Not at first. I only watched her, watched the quake ripple through her bones like her entire foundation had collapsed. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. She looked broken open, exposed. I have to see him, she whispered, eyes pleading. Please. I stared at the woman in front of me. The same woman who had slowly, silently withdrawn piece by piece from our life together. And still, I said nothing of what I was thinking. I didn't ask why she hadn't called Riley or Janelle, didn't demand to know why she'd come to me, not to the ones who might have understood this urgency. I didn't say what echoed, bitter and heavy in the hollow of my chest. Why him? Get into the car, I said, voice barely above a murmur. She nodded wordlessly, clutching her purse like a life raft, and followed me outside. The drive unraveled in oppressive silence, no music, no words, just the low growl of the engine and the rhythmic thrum of tires rolling over asphalt. My heart beat in my throat, hammering against the silence, louder than anything in that car. She didn't offer directions. The GPS on my phone, already loaded, lit the path. She curled into herself in the passenger seat, arms wrapped tightly around her body, as if holding something broken together with sheer force of will. 15 minutes passed before she spoke. "I didn't think I'd feel this way," she murmured, barely audible. I kept my eyes trained on the road, the yellow lines blurring under the headlights. "I thought it was over," she said, like she needed to hear it herself. "I really did." Still, I said nothing. But when I heard he might not make it, something inside me shattered. Then the words, the ones that struck like a blade sliding slow between ribs. "I still love him." The silence that followed wasn't silent at all. It was deafening, a void, not a cup, not a word, just the sudden vacuum of everything I believed being sucked into that single confession. She didn't turn to look at me. She stared out the window, her reflection cast in the glass, as if she'd said nothing at all. But her words sat between us, unmoving, unbearable. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned bone white. Still driving, still breathing. Somehow. She hadn't said maybe, hadn't couched it in uncertainty or softened it with guilt. She said it like a truth that had been waiting, crouched in some shadowed corner of her soul, waiting for this moment of chaos to erupt into the light. By the time we reached the hospital parking lot, she'd unbuckled her seatbelt before I had even shifted into park. "Thank you," she said, voice cracked, barely formed. I said nothing. She bolted, out of the car, across the lot, running like the pavement burned beneath her. Her heel twisted under her once, but she didn't stop. Ran like her heart was tethered to the building ahead. Ran like I wasn't real. Like I'd never been the man she once promised forever to. She never looked back. I watched the automatic doors inhale her like a breath. And then I sat there, frozen, hollow. I must have stared through the windshield for 20 minutes, numb, repeating the same sentence inside my head over and over. She ran to him. "Not you," I didn't follow. I didn't want to see how she'd cradle his hand, the tears she'd spill at his side. I didn't want to see the tenderness in her eyes, the look I hadn't seen directed at me in so long. It had started to feel like a dream. I drove home alone, too. When I stepped through the front door, the house felt too still, like it had held its breath in my absence. Her coat still hung where she left it, swaying slightly, as if her presence hadn't yet faded. One heel lay abandoned in the hallway, toppled on its side like a question mark. I stared at it too long. It's strange, the things grief chooses to fixate on. I went to our room. Her scent lingered in the air, sweet, fading. I sat on the edge of the bed and inhaled deeply, like I could trap her memory in my lungs. That's when the truth crashed in, brutal and unrelenting. It wasn't just that she still loved someone else. It was that I had been the one holding her together when she came undone. I was the one who had stayed up through the tears, who made her laugh when the world was too heavy. I was the one who stood beside her through the storm, holding her steady. And when the ground gave way beneath her again, she didn't run to the man who had rebuilt her. She ran to the one who broke her first. I stayed there for hours. No lights, no food, just the dark pressing in. I stared at the door, not because I wanted her to walk through it, but because I needed to know, was I still the one she'd come home to? At 1:07 a.m., the lock clicked. She stepped in, slow, tentative. Her face was blotched red, eyes rimmed with salt and sorrow. She stopped when she saw me, unmoving in the dark. "Julian," she said, her voice paper thin. I rose, walked past her, didn't touch her, didn't speak. The air between us stretched, taut and brittle. As I reached the door, she whispered, "Oh, please." It didn't mean anything. I was scared, that's all. I didn't mean it. But fear has a way of forcing truths to the surface, and her truth had come unguarded, naked, raw, and irreversible. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. I didn't slam it. I didn't have to. Some endings aren't loud. Some don't crack or crash or collapse in drama. Some doors only need to shut to say I'm done. When morning came, the house held the silence of a grave. Not peaceful, hollow. I sat on the bed, yesterday's shirt clinging to me like a memory I couldn't shake. Her side remained untouched, an outline of her still pressed into the sheets, but the warmth had long since bled away. There was no running shower, no aroma of hazelnut coffee, no soft hum of Lauryn Hill drifting through the kitchen, just the refrigerator's low drone and the tick, tick, tick of the hallway clock, each second beating away from the man I once was, the man she used to love. The suitcase thudded softly onto the hardwood floor, final, deliberate. Julian's hands moved with a quiet fury, folding denim and cotton into neat, lifeless stacks. 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, a hoodie that still held the faintest trace of her perfume, though he'd never admit it. Socks, boxers, the worn leather shaving kit he never replaced. These were not keepsakes. These were necessities. He unlatched the closet safe, retrieved his passport and birth certificate, and dropped them into the bag beside his laptop. Not a single gift she'd given him made it in. No novels annotated with shared laughter. No framed smiles from better days. He wasn't making a statement. This wasn't vengeance. It was self-preservation masquerading as stillness. The zipper closed with a low rasp, punctuating his decision like a sealed letter. Then, an ambush. His eyes snagged on the wedding photo resting on the dresser. They were laughing, mouths open mid-joy, her hand tangled in his collar like she couldn't bear to let go. He remembered the whisper behind that smile. Don't ever let me forget this feeling. But she had, so now he would too. Downstairs, he tore a sheet from the notepad pinned to the fridge with a tiny cactus magnet. The ink barely dried before he left it beside her favorite mug, the one that always blamed Mondays. His message was scrawled without emotion, without elegance. Don't worry, he can have you now. No name, no signature, no flourish, just raw, clean exit wounds. He lingered briefly in the doorway, the silence pressing in like fog. The couch where they'd curled up binge-watching crime documentaries into the early hours. The kitchen, where he once taught her how to dice onions, laughing through watery eyes. The bookshelf, assembled with care and splinters on their Asheville anniversary, filled with stories they swore they had read together. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a tomb, each room a glass case holding the remains of a life that had quietly died. He shut the door and didn't look back. The drive to Malik's place carved through the dark like a blade. His best friend since their reckless college years, Malik had the kind of loyalty that didn't come with questions. When Julian arrived, suitcase in hand, Malik didn't flinch, just opened the door, stepped aside, and muttered, "Guest room's clean." Julian dropped his bag in the corner, sat heavily on the futon. Malik grabbed 2 beers. "Is it bad?" he asked. Julian gave a slow, tired nod. "It's done." They didn't toast, didn't philosophize, just sat side by side, like 2 men who'd already survived the wreck and were now waiting to see what parts still worked. That night, they ate pizza in silence, the glow from the TV flickering across Julian's face. Every buzz of Malik's phone made him tense. He expected her voice to reach him through someone else. It didn't. Not yet. But he knew it would. Like thunder following lightning, it was only a matter of time. The first night without her felt like holding his breath underwater, agonizing and strangely calm. He didn't cry, didn't scream, just lay there staring into the ceiling's blank canvas, haunted by every goodnight kiss that may have masked a lie. Every quiet dinner where he was spilling pieces of his soul into a marriage that had already started to decay beneath her silence. By morning, his phone lit up. 5 missed calls, 2 voicemails, all Mariah. He didn't listen. He couldn't. He deleted them like they were spam, but her voice lingered anyway, echoing through him like a fault line. "I still love him." Those 5 words etched themselves into his marrow. He wandered the neighborhood with Malik, made a grocery list neither of them really needed, even helped sort out the chaos in the garage. But that sentence clung to him like a bloodstain. It wasn't just betrayal, it was annihilation. She had erased 5 years with 5 syllables. That afternoon, Julian sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, unraveling a life knotted together by shared everything. Bank accounts, subscriptions, emergency contacts. He unspooled each thread carefully, as if handling shrapnel. Her name was everywhere. His entangled in hers, Peeling himself out of that web was like skinning a wound that refused to clot. More messages came. Julian, please call me. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Can we talk? Just once, he powered the phone off, not to punish her, but to breathe. It was astonishing, really. 1 minute, you're the man she leaves without hesitation. The next, you're the only one who can save her from drowning in the flood she started. But he wasn't her raft anymore. That night, he slept. Not deeply, not soundly, but better. Clarity had arrived like a storm-washed sky. He wasn't going to fight for someone who retreated into the arms of her past when their present demanded courage. He wasn't going to battle the ghost of Tobias. Not when she welcomed him in like a second chance. Julian had given her his heart. She had bartered it for a memory. Letting go wasn't brave, it was necessary. 3 days passed. He didn't touch his phone, not because he feared her words, but because he already knew what they contained. Truth doesn't vanish in silence. It prowls behind the walls, hissing, waiting. He needed the stillness to listen to himself again. At Malik's, life fell into rhythm. Wake, coffee, shower, sit at the sun-drenched kitchen table, and scroll through headlines he didn't absorb. He tried reading once. The words melted off the page. His mind was still sorting through wreckage it hadn't cataloged yet. Malik didn't push. He moved like a shadow with purpose, leaving small things by the door. A protein bar, water, a stress ball, support without spectacle. Once passing by in a headset, Malik smirked and said, "You look like a man who just found out the chicken he's been cooking had a second family." Julian almost laughed. Almost. On the third morning, he breathed deep and powered the phone back on. The vibration was instant, furious, relentless. It buzzed for 15 seconds straight. 53 missed calls, 12 voicemails, 29 texts. Oh, from one name, Mariah. He stood in the center of the kitchen, the screen casting pale light on his face, watching as each notification stacked like bricks in a wall she'd built too late. Finally, he tapped the first voicemail. Maybe he needed to hear the lie again to believe it had happened, to believe the voice he once fell asleep beside was the same one tearing him apart now. Her voice crackled through, shaky and unsure. "Julian, I don't know if you're getting this, but I'm sorry. Please, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean what I said in the car. I was panicked." But panic didn't undo truth. It only revealed it. The rain tapped faintly on my shoulders as I wandered aimlessly through streets soaked in a sadness that didn't quite wash away. The air smelled of wet pavement and ghosted memories. And with each couple I passed, fingers entwined, shoulders brushing, I felt another layer of myself peel off like old paint on a forgotten wall. I hadn't planned the walk. It was just something my body decided to do while my mind stood still. I needed movement. I needed stillness. I needed everything and nothing all at once. By the time I found the bench near the dog park, my legs ached, but my heart ached more. I sat without thinking, watching strangers hurl neon tennis balls to creatures who didn't know heartbreak. Their joy made a kind of music against the ache inside me, sharp and beautiful. A golden retriever caught a ball midair, tail wagging like life had only just begun. I scrolled through her messages with a detachment I didn't feel. I wasn't thinking straight. I closed my eyes. Funny how panic makes people tell the truth. Her voice, preserved in voicemails I hadn't deleted, felt like a ghost whispering from inside the machine. I went to the hospital again. "He's awake." I couldn't go in. I kept thinking about you, about what I said, about how you looked at me afterward. The next one followed barely an hour later. "I know you hate me, I would, but I need you to hear me. Tobias isn't who I want. He was just a chapter I never finished properly. When the accident happened, everything I'd buried, it came out all at once. And then another. This one softer. I miss you. I miss the way you hold silence like it's something sacred. I miss your stupid humming in the shower. I even miss how you correct my grammar when I text too fast." I stopped listening after that. Not because it didn't gut me, but because it did. Every syllable carved something out of me. It wasn't the lie that ruined us. It was the choice, the reflex, the instinct. In the most shattered moment of her life, when raw emotions stripped her down to her marrow, She didn't reach for me. She reached for Tobias. That was the truth. Not dressed in poetry or softened with excuses, but bare, brutal truth. Every voicemail after that was triage, emotional per trying to salvage what she'd torched. That evening, Malik made spaghetti. Over the slurp of noodles and the explosions of a forgettable action film, I finally said it out loud. She wants to fix it. He didn't even blink. Do you? I stared at the television. No, I said, quiet but firm. I just want her to understand that when something breaks like this, you don't get to glue it back together just because you're sorry. He nodded once, slow and certain. Good. That's called clarity. Hurts like hell, but it's clean. Later, alone in bed, I stared at the ceiling and waited. I knew more messages would come. More apologies, more explanations, more ways to say I didn't mean it without ever owning that she did. I didn't block her. That would have felt like hiding. I wanted her to know I was still here, just not hers anymore. Forgiveness isn't always about returning. Sometimes it's about never going back. Sometimes it's choosing peace over proximity. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when Riley texted, "Can we talk?" Coffee. Just us. I stared at the screen. Not because I didn't know what she wanted. I did. Riley had always been the quiet fulcrum between Mariah and the rest of the world. Level-headed, observant, never meddling, never blind. But it took me an hour to reply. I wasn't afraid of what she'd say. I was afraid of what it would make me feel. Sure. Where? She sent the address of the cafe we used to visit, back when laughter came easy and silence didn't have edges. I arrived early, sat in the back, away from the windows, the cinnamon coffee scent stirring memories I wasn't prepared for. Mariah always ordered the same, hazelnut latte, 2 pumps, extra foam. I ordered black. No cream, no sugar. I didn't come for comfort. Riley stepped in, looking like she'd barely slept. A hoodie, old jeans, no makeup, eyes ringed with fatigue and care. She paused at the door as if weighing whether the truth was worth the walk to the table. Then she came over and sat down, hands around a mug she never touched. "Hey," she said. "Hey." I let the silence sit. She didn't rush to fill it. I respected that. "I'm not here to defend her," she said eventually. "Good, I replied. Her gaze dropped to the table. "You deserve to know what she didn't say." My chest tightened. She didn't cheat, not physically, but she crossed lines, emotional ones. Big ones. I leaned back, closed my eyes. The weight of it all pressed behind them like a rising tide. "How long?" she sighed. "It started small. They ran into each other at Naomi's wedding. Just catching up at first. Then late-night texts, venting, about work, about you, about how settled her life felt. That word hit like a punch. Settled. Like I was a compromise, a calm she resented. She told you all this? She confessed a few months ago, said it was harmless, that she just needed someone who knew her before everything started feeling like a script. And you? I told her she was threading a needle with fire, that she couldn't keep one foot in your life and one in his memory. I stared at the black swirl in my cup. My voice came out low, bitter. She told me she still loved him. Riley flinched visibly. She didn't mean it the way it sounded. I raised an eyebrow. She said it like someone drowning, she rushed on. Like someone who mistook a memory for a lifeline. Like she forgot that nostalgia isn't the same as love. Like she reached back and pulled out the last version of herself that felt free, and it happened to have his name on it. I didn't answer. I was done interpreting Mariah's chaos, done spinning hurt into poetry. "She's a wreck now," Riley murmured. "She keeps asking." But I held up a hand, quiet but firm. Whatever Mariah needed was no longer my job to fix. "I keep waking up and reaching for you." The words left her like breath slipping through cracked glass, soft, jagged, too late. Julian didn't flinch. He sat still, arms folded, shoulders rigid beneath the dim candlelight that flickered across his tired face. Outside the window, the city hummed quietly, the streetlights casting gold ribbons across the wet pavement. Inside, time felt slower, thicker, like the air between them was saturated with all the things they hadn't said and never could unsay. I keep waking up and reaching for you, Mariah repeated, quieter this time, like she was whispering it into a space that no longer welcomed her voice. Her fingers trembled as they toyed with the condensation dripping from her glass, as though trying to anchor herself to something tangible, something that wouldn't disappear when she blinked. Julian's voice came low, steady. Then maybe you should try reaching inward instead. She winced, not from cruelty, but from truth, the kind that slices deeper because it comes from the person who once knew how to hold your broken pieces. Riley told me you've been asking about me, he said, the words deliberate, almost clinical. Asking if I'll ever come back, that you didn't know what you had until it was gone. A humorless smile curled at the corner of his lips. Isn't it strange? How love always seems loudest after it's too late to matter. Mariah's face crumpled, but Julian wasn't done. She said you don't get to play the victim in this, he continued, his voice now carrying the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. That you broke the man who always showed up for you. And she's right. You didn't just walk away. You dismantled something sacred. He paused, exhaling like he was releasing years of pressure from his chest. Why are you telling me all this, Riley? Ichai. He had asked Rolar back when it was just him and his former sister-in-law sitting in a booth meant for grief. Riley's answer echoed in his mind now. Because I watched you love her. I watched you give everything, your time, your softness, your damn spine. I watched you carry a marriage she didn't even realize she dropped. Julian had turned away then, blinking hard against the burn behind his eyes, throat clenched around a tide of unshed sorrow. He hadn't spoken until she added, voice cracking, I told her it's over. That if you ever do come back, it'll be a miracle. Because she burned the bridge, and now she's just standing in the smoke, hoping it'll clear. And now here he was, face to face with the woman who'd left him aching in a house full of echoes. Mariah opened her mouth, but the words fell apart before they reached her lips. Instead, she slid something across the table. Julian stared. A Polaroid, worn at the edges, the kind that smelled faintly of old summers and dust. Their third anniversary. The lake house. Mariah's hair wild in the breeze, his arms wrapped around her. Both of them laughing, carefree, ridiculous, stupid with love. She almost threw this out, Riley had murmured. But I saved it. Thought maybe you'd want to remember the part that was real. Julian stared at it now. The laughter frozen on that glossy paper wasn't a lie. That version of them had existed. Brief, blinding, brilliant, and long gone. I didn't cry, he would tell himself later, but I felt everything. He slipped the photo into his jacket pocket with the reverence of a man burying a ghost. Thank you, he'd said to Riley. For what? She'd asked. For not hiding behind excuses. Back in the restaurant, he rose slowly. No hugs, no lingering glances, just a nod. Mariah didn't try to stop him. Outside, the air hit him like a cleansing wind, cool and indifferent. He walked toward his car, not healed, not mended, but lighter, like someone had finally pulled the final splinter from his skin, and for the first time in a long time, the wound was allowed to breathe. Julian sat behind the wheel, the quiet humming in his ears, like the hush before a new chapter. He took the photo out again, studied the blush etched across their younger faces. It didn't feel like betrayal anymore, just a farewell. He wasn't angry, he wasn't bitter, he was just done. Some truths rise from agony, others from long-held silence. But the hardest ones, the ones that carve their names across your ribs, come from the people who loved you enough to say them out loud. He hadn't met with Mariah for closure. He'd met her to build a wall. And finally, that last brick clicked into place. Her voice cracked like thin ice underfoot. Reaching for you, Mariah whispered, then remembering you are gone. I didn't blink. I wake up and remember I'm free, I replied, calm, even. There was a time when that thought clenched like panic in my chest, but now it washed over me like the clarity of cold water. It didn't hurt. It felt clean. She looked stricken, as if my peace wounded her more than any argument could. But her heartbreak was no longer my concern. She'd stood at the crossroads for months and turned her back on what we had. That was her choice. And I made mine. Her eyes fell. I still have the anniversary gift you never opened, she said, voice barely a murmur. It's in the top drawer of my nightstand. I shrugged, the gesture heavy with finality. Maybe give it to him. Her composure cracked. That's not fair, she snapped, the suddenness sharp. Don't reduce me to that one moment. You, of all people, know I'm more than a mistake. I stood, steady, resolute. You were more. You just chose to be less. She flinched like I'd struck her. I didn't relish saying it, but some truths need to land hard. They don't come with gentleness. They come with weight. From my coat pocket, I pulled out a small envelope and laid it on the table between us. Her name in my handwriting. No flourish, no heart. What's this? She asked, her voice small now. Closure, I said. Everything I needed to say, but no longer want to say out loud. She didn't touch it. Her hands hovered near her glass, trembling. Her cheeks flushed, not just with shame, but with something close to desperation. I wish I could go back, she whispered. You don't get to, I said softly. And then I left her there, her tears catching the light, her mouth silent where my name might have lived. If only she'd said it when it mattered. Outside, the air was brisk, and the sun was slipping into amber behind the city skyline. I stood on the sidewalk, breathing it in like a man surfacing after being held underwater. Not triumphant, just free. And that, at long last, was enough. The letter came 2 weeks later. I recognized the handwriting before I even picked it up. Graceful, deliberate, the kind she only used when something mattered. Once I loved that script. Notes tucked into my lunchbox. Messages on fogged bathroom mirrors. I used to read them like prayers. Now I wasn't sure I wanted to see a single word, no return address, no heart by my name, just plain black ink, Julian. I sat with it in my hands in Malik's spare room, where the echo of my life was quietly rebuilding itself. My bag sat in the corner, untouched. I hadn't hung a single shirt. Some part of me had clung to the lie that this was temporary, that I'd be going home. But that word, home, had been redefined. Still, I opened it. 4 pages, handwritten, no crossouts, no hesitation. It was careful, like she'd carved each word with precision, aiming to land every syllable exactly where it might bruise best. The first line hit like breath, knocked from lungs. I don't expect this to fix anything. She continued, by the time you read this, you've probably filed everything. Maybe you've moved on. Maybe you're done with me for good. But I needed to say this, not for your forgiveness, but for your understanding. And if I'm honest, for my own sanity. I shifted, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. I've spent the last 2 weeks unraveling every thread, every word, every silence, every time I chose comfort over truth. I picked Tobias because he didn't ask anything of me. He didn't hold up a mirror. He let me stay small. He reminded me of who I used to be, reckless, adored, unchallenged. When he got hurt, I didn't think. I just ran. She didn't sugarcoat it. It wasn't love, it was escape. That line stuck in my ribs like something sharp. Escape, not love. It explained everything, but it didn't undo anything. Still, I read on. You were the real thing, the hard, beautiful, relentless thing. You loved me like it was a choice every day. And that terrified me, because deep love demands presence, and presence demands courage. And I didn't know how to live up to it. I was always waiting to ruin it. So I did. I leaned forward, elbows on knees. The letter grew heavier in my hands with every sentence. When I said I loved him, I didn't mean it the way it sounded. But I know what you heard, and I know it was enough to break everything. I don't blame you for leaving. I respect it, because you've always told the truth. Even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. That's what I couldn't do. That's why you were the better half of us. That line cleaved me, not because I needed her guilt, but because part of me had needed her truth, not dressed in apology, just owned. And finally, she gave it. I keep replaying that car ride. I wish I had turned to you. I wish I had seen your silence for what it was. Grief. I wish I hadn't looked away. But I did, and you didn't. You stopped everything, the dinners, the forgiveness, the patience. You stopped carrying us when I let go. I folded the top of the page back slowly. I dream about the small things now. The way you sang to Moxie when she hated bath time. How you read cereal boxes like morning headlines. I miss the quiet between us that never needed filling. I miss the rhythm. The world is quiet now, but not the right kind. On the final page, her signature had changed. No pleas, no dramatic promises. I'm not asking for another chance. I only ask that in some quiet part of you, you remember we were real, that we lived in love once, and that it mattered. I folded the letter and held it for a long time. No tears, no rage, just silence. It didn't pull me back to her. It didn't shake my decision. But it softened something. Because in that stillness, I understood we were not defined by our collapse. We were defined by the love that came before it. The years of choosing each other when it wasn't easy. The grace of trying even when afraid. Yes, she failed me. Yes, she turned away. But I carried the best of what we had like a scar that no longer hurt. Not to return to it, never that. But to move forward without dragging bitterness behind me like a chain. I placed the letter gently into a small wooden box in Malik's spare room, where it joined a few old keepsakes, photos, birthday cards, a pendant from my late grandmother, and with it, I laid to rest the final weight of us. The letter didn't belong in a drawer beside my socks or tucked behind my driver's license or wedged between old texts and half-read articles on my phone. No, it belonged elsewhere, among the relics of a life no longer lived, shelved next to the kinds of memories you don't revisit daily, but bow your head to when you do. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without interruption. I didn't reach for my phone in the dark or scroll with hollow hope. I didn't ache to see Mariah's name. I didn't fear it either. I simply exhaled, and the air left my lungs unburdened. No catch, no sting, just breath. The move came on a Wednesday, a day so devoid of drama it almost mocked the weight it carried. No birthdays, no anniversaries, just a cold midweek morning under a sky thick with clouds, the color of ash and regret, sagging like wet cloth. It wasn't symbolic. It was just the day my new lease began. Strange how healing rarely waits for fireworks or full moons. It sneaks in on unremarkable dates, asking only that you let it. I hoisted the last box into the bed of my truck. A sparse collection, some clothes, a weathered lamp, my old record player, in a small, time-worn wooden box containing the letter from Mariah. I hadn't reopened it since it arrived, but I hadn't thrown it away either. There are pieces of your past that deserve preservation, even if they no longer belong in your present. They are not souvenirs, nor scars, just proof that something once mattered. Malik stepped out onto the porch holding two steaming mugs. "So this is it," he said, offering me one. "This is it," I echoed, wrapping my hands around the warmth. He raised his mug in salute. To growth, to pain, to starting over. We clinked mugs, and I replied, "To silence that finally sounds like peace." We lingered in that quiet space, brothers, bonded by survival. He had been there through the worst of it, never probing, never pushing, just present. That kind of loyalty is rare, too often invisible, and utterly priceless. "Think she'll sign the papers?" he asked, voice low, like he didn't want to disturb the moment. "She already did," I replied, nodding toward the glove box. "A week ago." He nodded slowly as if that confirmed something he'd already suspected. "And you good?" I hesitated, watching a squirrel skitter across the lawn. Then I looked back at him. I'm not angry anymore. Just done. The drive to Faro took a little over 2 hours, just far enough from the city to feel like a clean break. The cottage was modest, nestled at the edge of town with peeling white shutters and a porch that creaked like an old man's knees. The rent was reasonable. The neighbors seemed nosy in the way that meant someone would notice if you didn't come home. But most of all, it was mine, a space untouched by her. No trace of Mariah in the air, no laughter soaked into the walls, no phantom of her hair drifting across pillowcases. The moment I turned the key in the door, I unlatched Moxie's crate. She burst out, half border collie, half beautiful mystery, all untamed joy. I had met her at the shelter when I'd gone in just to look. That lie lasted 8 minutes. She pressed her forehead to the glass and looked at me like she'd already read the whole story of my life and decided to be the next chapter. Now she tore through the empty living room, tail swishing like a conductor's baton in a symphony of new beginnings. Yeah, I whispered to her, watching her dance through the space. We're going to be okay. I spent the rest of the day unpacking boxes, hammering shelves into place, and crafting a playlist I could hum without memory, clawing at every chorus. I set up the record player last. The stylus landed softly on a Coltrane's track, Ballads from Another Life, a quiet nod to the man I was before everything cracked. That evening, I wandered down to the lake near the edge of town. It was still, perfectly still, like it had learned to hold silence with reverence. I sat on a bench, Moxie curling at my feet, her chin resting on her paws. The stillness wasn't sharp anymore. It didn't echo. It settled. And in that space, I thought of Mariah. Not with fury, not even sorrow, just memory. I remembered her laugh at that birthday party, guacamole smeared across her wrist, making me forget my name with a glance. I remembered the way she once looked at me like she believed in forever. And I remembered the moment I realized she didn't. Not anymore. I had spent endless nights retracing our downfall like a crime scene aching to understand. Why the lies? Why Tobias? Why wasn't I enough? But healing whispers truths that heartbreak drowns out. Sometimes people don't leave because you're broken. They leave because they are. And you can't drag someone back from their own wilderness. Moxie twitched beside me, eyes locked on a duck waddling by with self-importance. I smiled. You've got it all figured out, don't you? She licked my hand once, like punctuation. Back at the cottage, I cooked pasta, poured a glass of wine, and opened my journal. For the first time in months, words came. Nothing poetic, just real, messy, fragmented truths. I used to think that love had to endure to mean anything, that anything with an expiration date was counterfeit. But now I know some love stories aren't meant to span a lifetime. Some are chapters, not books. And when they end, it isn't failure. It's closure. A nod to what was and an invitation to what might be. I closed the journal, placed it gently on the nightstand, and climbed into bed. Moxie leapt up beside me, curled into the hollow behind my knees like she'd always belonged there. I stared at the ceiling, waiting for the ache to return. It didn't. A week later, I signed up for a woodworking class in town. Not because I had a gift for it, God no, but because I needed to make something again. With my hands. With my time. With what was left of my heart. I met people. I laughed. We talked about old records instead of old wounds, and for once, it felt easy. One afternoon, my phone buzzed. Malik. Just checking in, he said. You building a cabin or a whole new personality out there? I laughed. Both. You sound lighter. I am. A pause. She called me. I closed my eyes. I figured. She's dating again. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Good, I said, then added more softly, with an asterisk. Laughter rippled through the small room like the final notes of a fading melody, echoing long after the screen had gone dark. A candle flickered near the corner, casting soft amber shadows across faces still caught between thought and sentiment. The story they'd just watched, raw, poignant, utterly human, left a quiet reverence hanging in the air. Behind the scenes of such moments, a voice urges, speak. Your thoughts, no matter how small, are the threads that bind us. Every comment, every word of feedback you leave becomes a brushstroke in the evolving canvas of shared storytelling. We're not merely crafting content, we're tracing the pulse of real lives, one memory, one confession, one revelation at a time. Perhaps you've seen this video before. Perhaps the details stirred a familiar ache, a half-formed thought that never found voice. Yet even now, your reflection matters. Each insight you offer is not repetition, it's reinvention. It allows us to listen better, to reach farther, to shed new light where only shadow stood. What you witnessed today was more than narrative. It was a mirror. a fragment of countless stories whispered in corners of the internet, scribbled into notebooks, or spoken between strangers who needed just once to be heard. It was a single petal from the bloom of collective human experience. Here, in this corner of the digital world, we believe storytelling is not a luxury. It is our oldest bridge. Through tales like these, we navigate the shifting contours of love, betrayal, healing, and hope. We begin to understand that even when life bruises us, we are not alone. We are seen, mirrored in another's struggle, another's grace. So let us keep sharing. Let us continue crafting tales that not only stir hearts, but shape them. Stories that grow roots in the quiet places of your day and linger long after the credits fade. If you haven't yet, stay with us. Like, follow. Not for the sake of numbers, but for the sake of connection. Your presence propels us forward. Your curiosity fuels our purpose. Until next time, hold space for wonder, keep asking questions, and remember, every story told with honesty is a lantern for someone else's path.